Hey, I'm GW Ayers, and now you're watching Murder Metal Mayhem.
This is Pete Altieri of Murder Metal Mayhem, and I've got the privilege of doing this interview with GW Ayers. He's not only the chief sales officer at Rainier Arms and a retired Army Sergeant First Class, but he's my friend. He used to be my boss, but that was a long time ago. So GW, this is such a pleasure to talk to you today, and it does feel weird not calling you Sarge because I used to have to call you that, but what's the weather like today in the great state of Kansas?
Well, we're having spring weather. Our spring weather is very schizophrenic. So it could be 30 degrees one morning and then 50 degrees the next morning. So we're on the upswing. We got some cloudy skies and some rain that we desperately need here.
Right.
But other than that, it's one of those things that if you don't like the weather in Kansas, just wait 5 minutes.
That's how it is where I am in Illinois. I get it. It's very similar to the Midwest, I believe. So now we go back a ways. As I mentioned, I arrived at Fort Hood, Texas in February of '92. So when did you get there? And can you kind of explain to our viewers what our relationship was, working relationship was back then? What were we doing?
So, I think I arrived, not too long after you, probably the summer of '92. And I was assigned to an operations cell, the F3 shop of a cavalry squadron. And when I arrived there, you were assigned as the driver of the and maintainer for our command vehicle. So where we set up our command post. And you and I were we set up and we were the communications node for the entire squadron.
Yeah.
So, they used to call us the voice of Gary Owen.
That's right. That's right. I still have that plaque you guys made for me with the mic on it and stuff.
Dude, I still have mine too.
Really?
And, yeah. So mine was different. I snatched mine out of the radio, if you remember, right? That one time I was so upset with the commo shop not to be able to get our comms to work. So they, Staff Sergeant Garrett at the time, captured that hand mic and made that.
Funny times, man. Funny times for sure. Yeah. Now I left the Army in '94, April of '94 with a medical discharge, but you of course stayed in for many years. So what sort of combat were you seeing, after that happened, after I left in '94? What was your career path at that point?
So I stayed on with 17 Cav there at Fort Hood, Texas. Now it's called Fort Cavazos because of whatever. But I stayed on there until '98. And then I went to U.S. Army Recruiting Command where they taught me they taught me some very, very ninja-like sales skills. It was, no other place in the world will send you to a 6-week sales school and pay for it. And it's really good sales training. But be that as it may, I graduated that thing and went on to be an Army recruiter for a few years because that's what the Army wanted of me. Right. And then I transitioned to Fort Lewis, Washington, because they had a new experimental unit they were standing up called Stryker Brigade. It was wheeled armor. The Soviets, our enemies, have had wheeled armor. They called motorized rifle regiments forever. And I always thought it was the best reconnaissance type of platform that money could buy. And I wanted to be a part of it during my last piece. In that time frame where I got orders to go to Fort Lewis and getting there, 9/11 happened. So then, now we're on a real world war footing. We're driving these experimental vehicles into the combat zone very quickly. So I feel very fortunate that I was the very first person in my platoon as the platoon sergeant. So I formed those guys. I was able to train with those guys for a long, long period of time. And that will be the difference in some of the other things we talk about, some of the other stressors and some of the other things that has happened to soldiers recently and in the near past, aside from what I experienced and what my theories are based on, one, my self-education, and two, my actual experience battling some demons that all my brothers and sisters seem to wrestle with.
Yeah. So how many deployments did you go through into combat?
So I was at the end of my military career when I deployed. So as a matter of fact, I put my retirement paperwork in because I was, it was obvious I wasn't going to go get another strike, and the Army was the Army had a footprint that wasn't conducive to my advancement. So I decided to go ahead and get out. And then the Army says, "Oh no, there's this thing called a war. You can't get out." So I went to combat for 14 months, from October, from the end of September of 04 to the end of October in 05. So I was there for 13 months and some change. I knew I was retiring. My retirement paperwork was approved while I was in theater. So I decided that when everybody else was starting to filter out and they needed people to stay behind to do some things, I would do that based on the fact that it was going to be my last one, my only one.
Right.
So I only did one deployment. I was deployed several times, but never to a hot war until I went to Iraq in 04, 05.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I was seeing these guys going back and forth. I mean, that had to be tough for sure. So
I've got some friends that were in the Army that have 7, 8 deployments.
Oh my God.
These are regular Army deployments. So these are 7 or 8 years in combat.
Wow. That's
it's
unbelievable.
amazing.
So speaking of that, I mean, you've been very candid about your experiences suffering with PTSD. So I wondered if you could explain to the viewers a little more about it and maybe what we don't know, because I'm sure what we're hearing, through reading articles and stuff, maybe isn't capturing the true essence of what that's about for the guys like yourself that have dealt with that.
Well, and returning from combat, I did all kinds of things wrong, right? I returned from combat. I transitioned from Army into the civilian world like very rapidly within 90 days. And we do what we always do, right? We just push and cram all our emotions down. And it's like you only got, as we continue to cram it in and put a lid on it, cram it in, put a lid on it, cram it in, put a lid on it, it's like a trash compactor that's out of room after a while. So you can't cram any more in, so it's got to squirt out somewhere. And if you put something new in, maybe something old squirts out and raises its angry head. I remember the first exhibit of bad behavior associated with PTSD. When you're in combat, you're the master, especially at the job I held. I was the master of everything that I could see. If I wanted you to do something, you did it, right? Or we took you away.
Right.
or worse.
Right.
So if there was a two-way kinetic environment, then we did what we had to do. I never, this is going to sound horrible, but I never suffered any guilt for having to apply kinetic or apply my skills to someone who was trying to kill me or my soldiers or other people. I never felt bad about that. The source of my grief and the source of my angst is, I had to order people to do some things that they didn't come back from. And I don't think that that will be something I have to carry around with me forever. Yeah. But back to the story. I was in a mall. I was getting my cell phone turned back on, and there was a kid standing next to me screaming for a friend of his, like really loud. And when I say kid, he was probably 16, 17 years old. He was over 6 foot tall. He was actually bigger than I was. And I snapped on the spot. I just said, I just used a bunch of bad language. I called him everything I could call him. I said, and he says, "I'm just looking for my friend." And I remember telling him to as clear as day, I said, "If you don't shut your mouth, they're going to be looking for you." Damn. And that's when the person I was with at the time pulled me away. And then the funny backstory to that is I calmed down, went back to the kiosk to get my cell phone turned back on, and I apologized to the guy that was helping me. I said, "I'm sorry, I had an outburst." He goes, "Sir, if I could do that every day, I would." So I felt a little vindicated, but I did get my motorcycle home and got the hell out of there as quick as I could before dude's dad showed up, and then I really had to have some problems.
Wow.
But that was one of the first times where I felt myself just turn on the spot and not be totally in control of my emotions at the time.
Wow.
And it over the next, man, I've been, from 2006 until now, 18 years, I've had times in my life where I found myself in that emotional boil over, basically. And then about 3 years ago, I decided that I probably should talk to somebody about it. It was a two-pronged thing. The VA said, probably has some PTSD, you should talk to somebody. Right. And our VA here in Wichita is one of the best I've ever been associated. And so I went down to the vet center. That's not, so what the VA has done, which is really cool, is they've built these vet centers off campus of the VA. So if you got a bad taste in your mouth of the VA, but you can go to the vet center, you get a lot better. You feel better about it. And I met my counselor. Was a nice lady. She gave me a lot of tools. We unpacked some stuff that was bothering me from combat, and unpacked some stuff that happened to me way before combat, and even in my childhood that I didn't know was grinding on me. So
interesting.
Gave me the tools. Gave me some literature to read, and there was most of the stuff that was interesting to me was Vietnam War veterans writing about their experiences and how they overcame the stuff that they were dealing with. And I was reading these books, and I'm like, shit, I feel the same way these people do.
Wow.
And and we could talk. I'm sure we're going to talk about some other things over the next few minutes. But once I started to know that, well, first I didn't think I was nuts, and I didn't think I was. I faced the same demons as people that I hear about that are incapacitated by this stuff, are acting out and criminals. And I didn't think I was. So I didn't seek treatment because I didn't feel like that. I didn't. The behavior didn't manifest itself, but I felt horrible all the time. I felt bad. I didn't like me. I didn't think I was doing good things. I knew that no more. And what was worse is I would do good things, and people would say, "Hey, man, that was a great job," or "We really appreciate you being around." I would immediately feel guilty because I didn't think I was worthy of that. Right?
Oh, wow.
And so once I was able to accept the fact that, dude, I'm pretty okay. Right. And then I got the counseling I needed, and I got to talk about it, and honestly, cried about it, prayed about it, and I feel much better. Just the little tools she gave me that I use today.
That's amazing. Do they have care in the community down there? They have it up here. If they have a specialty they don't have at the VA, they'll send me to the civilians, and they pay for it. And I've done several things using that, which is awesome. The VA has really come a long way since I got out in '94. Come a long way with the care that I've received here. I mean, I'm pretty impressed with it.
Well, the biggest thing that happened to us as veterans, so I'm able to use TRICARE because I'm a retired soldier, as well as I'm able to use the VA system. And I'll be honest with you, I play one against the other. So I try to get the best deal for me using either one of the systems, right. Whether it's medication or if it's treatment, and it's funny, if I see my civilian doctor and they document an issue, the VA accepts that. Whereas if I went to the VA and they treated me for an issue, it's just like going to sick call. They think you're just trying to get over it.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
I found myself utilizing those types of things. And I realized that, their eye clinic was non-existent in here in Wichita. So they sent me to an eye doctor out on the economy, which is perfect. I mean, the care is the same as if I used my TRICARE benefit, and it was free. So
yeah, they do glasses at my VA,
right? Right, Pete? We have to pay for this healthcare on the front end.
That's true. I got my glasses, just the ones I got on right now at the VA. They do it now here at mine, which is awesome. They never did before. So like I said, it has come a long way. But when it comes to this Idaho 4 case, GW, the name Brent Kopaka comes up often, and he was that former 82nd Airborne soldier that suffered a traumatic brain injury and then following PTSD. And you told me a little bit about what his experience in theater may have been like. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about that and the unit that he was in?
So the unit he was in, 82nd Airborne Division, we haven't dropped anybody into combat since, well, we did in Afghanistan in the very early days of the war, but we haven't had a major airborne deployment. So that unit deployed just like everybody else, they deployed into ground vehicles and they used them into combat. The thing I find unfortunate that my unit trained for years together, then we deployed for a deployment. And then the Army says, okay, I promise you when you get back, you'll have 18 months and then you go back again. So you have at least 18 months out of theater to reintegrate with your family and have babies and figure out what you're going to do next and maybe move to a new job. But what happened to a lot of these guys is the surge happened, right?
Right.
And then during the surge, a lot of these units deployed for 18 months.
Wow.
That's a long ass time.
Yeah, that is.
And then they would be back. All right, so you're in a unit for a year, then you deploy for 18 months, and you come back on your redeployment thing. So now you're in 3 to 4 years at this one unit. The Army says you got to move to another unit. Then you move to a unit that has deployment orders. Holy shit! So now you move to a unit, and now 6 months after you come back from combat, you're back in the shit, right?
Wow.
So you never really get to decompress and exercise your resiliency, is what the military is calling it right now, which is fighter resiliency, is being able to, one, recognize the fact that you're going to go and do things that normal humans would never have to be asked of, and two, you're going to have the psychological effects of, one, being away from your loved ones, two, the loneliness associated with even though you're surrounded by 800-900 of your closest friends, because you're separated from what you know and love, which is the United States of America and everything that we have to offer ourselves and others. And three, you're going to be asked to do things, lack of sleep, lack of proper nutrition, stress just piled on top of you, and you have zero things at the time. You had zero recourse to deal with. All those things combined are horrible. So I suspect what happened to this gentleman is he was in the 82nd Airborne, probably did a couple one-year deployments, probably did a couple 6 to 9 month deployments with very little recovery time in between. I don't know for sure without looking at his record, but but knowing what I know about that unit, number one, and knowing what I know about the deployment cycle really closely after I got out. Like I looked at some of his history, and we were on the same piece of dirt at different times.
Okay.
So I know that place is where I was stationed and where I went was very violent. I know during the surge there was a lot of shooting and a lot of casualties taken. And what do we do? So you get one of your buddies killed in combat, right? The Army says, okay, we're going to have a memorial ceremony for that. So all your grieving is done then.
Right.
And then when you leave that ceremony, you're expected to flip the switch and then go back into soldier without a care, only taking care of orders mode. And man, human beings can't do that.
Right.
Can't.
No. Yeah, I know that you said he was in a pretty hot area. So, I mean, if they're sending in the 82nd Airborne, I'm guessing it would have been pretty hostile situation.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, these combat units, I was in the prestige of the 82nd Airborne precedes them, right? They have a very rich history, and they have a history of going places where our country needs them the most, and that's true. That's what happens. But they had the same unit, or they had the same missions that my guys had in the Striker Brigade. Same thing. Sometimes they had less survivable means at their disposal because they were mounted in Humvees and we were in a highly survivable vehicle being the Striker. So let me just explain to you what happens in a soldier's brain. I used to use a little bit of prayer. I used to use a little bit of meditation prior to and directly after a patrol that would cause me to get my body reset. Right. But I can remember, and the thing I had that sticks with me to this day is the cloud of dread. The cloud of dread.
Wow.
That cloud of dread is over your head every second of your life there. And then when you come home and you know you got a redeployment or you got a deployment order, now you got more cloud of dread. Right? You never get out from under it. And it is a crippling emotion. Even to this day, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and saying, "Oh my God!" And then I have to tell myself, I'm like, "Brother, you're laying next to a beautiful woman. You're in a safe environment. The sound you're hearing is not gunfire; it's your dog snoring." So those things, on cue.
Yeah, that's funny, but that's interesting.
She's not a service dog. I put that vest on her because it's great camouflage for going to the grocery store.
That's a good idea. That is a good idea.
People should do that. But I will just tell you that that cloud of dread, I still suffer from that. That was crippling. It is the thing. Like you're riding down the road, knowing that the bomb could go off and kill everyone in this vehicle any second, and you have no choice, no defense, no everything. It's a surprise gotcha. So you have to place your life in a higher power's hands every time you leave the wire. And I used to pray, but I didn't pray for what you think. I didn't pray that we would vanquish the enemy or we would come back all safe. I prayed that my enemy would be lazy one more day. Because they were lazy and they weren't very good at their job. So we would always catch them preparing, or they weren't ready for us, or something happened. There was a couple times they set some bombs off and they prepared for us and whatever, and we lost the soldiers based on their preparedness. But for the most part, we would roll up when we had a mission to take somebody specifically. They were. So, yeah. And I think my higher power had something to do with that and allowed us to do righteous work in his name. So
that's an interesting way of looking at it. That's for sure. Now, he was out of the Army on a medical discharge, Brent Kopaka, and, for about 13 years when he was shot and killed by police. And there are some questions surrounding his death. I mean, too many to get into in this interview, but law enforcement said he had threatened to shoot his roommates, and then that's when SWAT was called. And so I'm wondering, how do you think PTSD might play into that, and how common is it for soldiers in his situation to act violently to that degree?
Well, first of all, you won't see any parchments behind my desk that say I'm a physician or psychologist or any kind of medical or psychological profession. All I can say is my own personal experience. I do know that when gentlemen or when soldiers experience PTSD and a traumatic brain injury, it's the magic cocktail, right? And if the VA was treating him with psychotropic drugs or anything like that, man, it causes big problems. Okay, you don't have to use soldiers as an example of this. NFL football players.
Right.
Suffering traumatic brain injuries yearly, maybe monthly, maybe weekly.
Right.
You have a guy like Junior Seau left the NFL on top of the world and killed himself. You ask yourself why?
Right.
Because he just couldn't deal with the wiring was off in his head, and he just couldn't deal with either the pain, or he couldn't deal with he couldn't get outside of the self-loathing or whatever it was that he was suffering with, and we'll never know probably. And he took his own life.
Yeah, Chris Benoit, the wrestler, another guy that could have been in that same boat. Steroids on top of it, and that was the thing too. I learned that Brent Kopaka was using meth at the time that this happened. So my gosh, you put meth. He was drinking heavily, traumatic brain injury, PTSD, and
maybe psychotropic drugs from the VA. You'll never know that.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Some of the similarities that we'll find, if we took the time to look at it closely, some of the similarities we'll find in mass shootings that happened in the recent past. There's a lot of similarities. There's people that were on the fringe of society, people that were being treated for mental illness using chemicals. Those things are coming back to play with us, right? And we're not putting the pieces together. We're not saying, oh, these are similarities. And we have the problem in our society that we didn't used to have. Pete, we're close to the same age. I think you're a few years younger than me. When we were in school, good, bad, happy, or sad, if you were weird, someone said you were weird.
Right.
And you modified your behavior, or people endeared you for it. One other thing.
Right.
We don't do that anymore, because that's bullying, right? And I'm not saying that we need to ramp up the stress on people that are already feeling stressed in their lives. But I just think that we miss a part of recognizing that someone might need some help at a very early stage, and we can use a little peer pressure, use a little community molding in order to keep our society together. I don't think any of my classmates at the time, and I graduated from a country high school in Virginia, would be able to point out one or the other one and says, "Oh, that guy's a school shooter," or "That guy over there, or that lady over there is going to kill her kids in the bathtub." I mean, those are the things that I think that we suffer, we deal with today that we don't necessarily do. Now, in this guy's case, death by a cop, that's a thing.
Yeah, and that is one thing I think that could have been in play. He said he had premonitions that that's how he was going to die. So you wonder, was it a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing, When
I was in some of my darkest days, I'd have self-conversations. And the conversations, and a lot of people say, "Well, I heard voices." No, you don't hear voices, or I didn't anyway. I just heard me talking to me, right? I'm like, "Hey, you're not the best person that you're not the person that these people think you are. Maybe you should tell them. Why are you a fraud?" Those kinds of things, right? Those kinds of destructive thought processes. And if I'm not lying to anybody, but thoughts of harming myself, I had them. I took excessive risk on my motorcycle, drove like an asshole, right? I don't know if you if I can use that kind of language on your cast here.
Yeah, it's fine.
But brother, I can remember at 110 miles an hour,
holy shit,
on a road in Kansas, coming up on a curve, saying to myself, "You really should let off the accelerator.
Wow.
You really should let off the accelerator. You really should let off the accelerator now." And I almost didn't make that curve because I was that close. I just took excessive risks because I valued other lives way more than I valued my own. And that's drilled into us from a very early time in our military experience.
That's true.
That's why the majority of the selfless service aspect of our culture in the military carries over into our lives outside the military, and we value ourselves a ton less than we value those around us. Now, in this guy's experience, he had a lot of things stacked against him, right? We already talked about the fact that he had PTSD diagnosed. He had a traumatic brain injury. He was abusing substances that are horrible to your brain and to your body. And then add alcohol on top of that is a great catalyst for disaster. So his ability to make rational decisions on the fly were probably extremely diminished.
Yeah. Definitely, definitely. Another thing that came out about him is he had this extensive weapons collection, machetes, and had it in like this strange like display in his apartment. And I know you do weapons for a living now, and we're going to get into that. But how common is it for former military to that maybe suffer from PTSD or not to have a weapon collection? I mean, is it to feel secure, or is there maybe some other reason for that?
Well, I think it's easy to create some stigma around veterans and PTSD and the ownership of items that'll cause bodily harm to themselves and others. I've had guns my whole life, and you know that, Pete.
Yeah, I remember coming over your house and you had them all laid out. You were cleaning them, and I was like, wow. And I grew up around weapons. I mean, I have nothing against it at all, but yeah, you definitely had the extensive collection.
And I've always had the love for them. Do I go places without a weapon? No. Two reasons. Well, more than two, but the two main reasons is no one's responsible for my safety but me. That's simple. Mm-hmm. And those around me, my loved ones. And two, I'm currently in my job now, I'm a kidnap risk, believe it or not. I always joke, I say, fat people can't be kidnapped. It's impossible. And you'll have to feed me. That's not going to work out for you.
That's hilarious.
But because I'm in charge of what I'm in charge of, people would want to take me to the facility in which these things are located and get them.
Right, I could see that.
But they're not going to be able. They're going to have to do it with a fight. I'm not going to. That's not going to happen. So let's talk about the veteran mentality in weapons first. The only way that you had to defend yourself in a very critical environment of combat is to have a weapon. And when you didn't have your weapon, you felt like you were naked. I remember flying back from Kuwait, back into combat, and we flew in. The enemy didn't have any air-to-air. They couldn't shoot us down. I was so deathly afraid. I was looking around the aircraft I was in. I was like, that guy's got a pistol. That dude's got a rifle. Okay, so I'll have those if something bad happens. So that was my mentality. I needed to get my weapons as quickly as possible. I got off the chopper, and my boss was like, "Hey, let's go have some chow." I'm like, "Not before I go and draw my rifle and my pistol." And so once I got my rifle and pistol back, I could go back to normalcy operations in the combat theater. Okay, so right. that transitions into our civilian life. A book I read when I first started my counseling trek was explained that. It was talked about keeping the monster inside, right? Because once we go to combat and I know that the video here is going to start looking weird because I got sunshine coming through my daylight. So maybe it's the good Lord shining on me because I'm telling some truths here. So keeping the monster inside, and we do that from using different things. And one of the things that most of us as protectors, as we need to have our instruments of protection, and that's usually some firearms. And we know guns, and we're comfortable around guns and instruments of self-protection and instruments of mayhem, basically, right? Mm-hmm. That we tend to have those things. But we're not by ourselves in that realm. There's firefighters and police officers, cops, everyone. They find themselves because that's part of their culture, right? That makes them feel comfortable,
and they know what's out there.
It doesn't surprise me that he had a weapons. People call it a collection, but he probably had, I don't know, what the hell's a collection? Right. I mean, I'm looking to my left right now at my closet full of weapons, and I'm like, if people saw what I had just in this room, they'd probably think I'm. Guns are my thing. I'm gonna move this camera a little bit so we don't.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so, like I said, it didn't surprise me he had a collection. Now, What he did with that stuff and how he displayed it could be some telling factors of what his mental state was. But the fact that he used them is not surprising.
That makes sense. That makes
and
sense.
If he bought weapons while under the influence of any of those substances, then he committed crimes right there.
Right.
In my business, I know the forms very well, and what most people want to say about firearms and firearm possession is that the gun store let him buy that gun. Well, we don't have much of a choice with a lie on the form,
right?
i.e., Hunter Biden.
Right.
So, no matter what side of the political aisle you sit on, he committed a felony.
Right.
And if I did it and got caught, I should go to jail.
Right. That's true. Now, one of the things that comes up when Brent's name is in this Idaho 4 discussion is, could he have done the quadruple murder? And what I'm wondering about is, given what we know about him with all the things going on and the substance abuse and all of that, do you think somebody like that would be in control enough to do an act like that and to be able to walk out of there without leaving any trace? I mean, there's no evidence outside that house. I mean, and they give like a 10, 15-minute window, law enforcement does. I mean, it just seems to me to be a stretch, but I just was wondering if in that kind of a state, would you have the wherewithal to not leave evidence behind and all of that?
Well, man, look at, you just have to ask yourself, you look at all the answer is yes. I can't live inside that gentleman's head, but I know that what has happened in the past with other people, that very very stringent thought process, a very good amount of planning. One of the things we do well as military people is we plan well to the nth degree, and we rehearse it, right? To make sure that we know what we're doing, and it's almost second nature when we get to do it. Now, you know that as well as I do.
Right.
We rehearse brigade set battles, and we rehearsed what we would do in a gas attack as individuals.
Right.
To the point where it was second. Mm-hmm. So the fact that could he commit those murders and not leave any evidence behind? I don't know.
Yeah, and if he was working with somebody else too, that could have been possible to, maybe have somebody with him that was able to kind of keep it reined in. I don't know. I mean, it's all speculation, but
it's a pretty messy crime scene not to leave behind a lot of evidence. I would think.
Right. Yeah.
Just based on the research I've done and what I saw in the beginning of when the stories came out.
Right. A skin cell was the only DNA left behind on a knife sheath. One skin cell. That seems very suspicious to me.
So anybody that does any research in the criminal investigation knows the theory of transfer. Wherever you go, you leave you, and wherever you go, whenever you leave, you take a piece of that with you.
Right.
No matter where it is and what it is. If they'd have went in there in complete Tyvek suits, and you know about Tyvek based on your other career that you had,
mm-hmm.
There's still a way that fibers get left behind and stuff. But we don't know how sophisticated the crime scene investigation guys were. We don't know.
Right.
And in 8 hours after the fact, I mean, some evidence will expire over time.
Right.
You have to be very careful where that's concerned.
Yeah, because the DNA was left on the button snap of the K-bar knife sheath, and DNA does not survive very long on brass, is what I've found. So there's an issue there, is how long could it have really lasted, and was it planted evidence? And that's a whole different rabbit hole. And this case is just fraught with all sorts of stuff like that, that's for sure. Now, a little off topic, wanted to talk to you about Delphi only because of your expertise. Delphi, Indiana, crimes happened in 2017, two young girls. And there's a piece of evidence in that case that I wanted to get your opinion on.
Sure.
The suspect had a 40 caliber Sig Sauer pistol. They found an unspent round in the woods by the victims. And I wondered, how reliable are those marks that an unspent round ejected from a weapon? Would you feel very confident that that could be matched up? I mean, I know a fired round, you've got more signs, but an unspent round, what are your thoughts on that?
So so what we can do with the type of equipment we have now is pretty amazing. I would say that, they probably could tell that it came out of a semi-automatic pistol, and they probably could they could take a pistol of like manufacture and caliber and duplicate the round being ejected from the pistol, and then look at the tooling or the marks that the tooling on the pistol, or not tooling, but the surfaces of the pistol left on the round,
mm-hmm.
and be reasonably sure that it came out of the same type of pistol. But could they match it to the pistol? I don't know about that.
Yeah. Also suspicious.
And I will tell you that there's some things that are in the favor of law enforcement. Comparatively speaking, the 40 caliber wasn't sold nearly as much as 9mm and 45s. So you can narrow down the prospect pool or the suspect pool by a lot, because not very many people bought the 40.
Okay.
Then if that suspect owned that type of pistol and they can match the marks from the pistol to that type of gun, we're starting to see the things line up, right?
Right.
It's going to cause those guys to have to, it's all circumstantial, of course, but doesn't look good for the person who was owned a gun like that, I wouldn't think.
Right. And then the problem is they had this crime scene secured. They didn't find this round. Then the crime scene was released and then reestablished again, and that's when they found it. So very, very, very similar to Delphi or in Idaho 4, of just all this mystery and these weird coincidences. I mean, it's a scary case for sure. So I just was curious since that was your line of work. And so that segues into, so you're out of the Army. It's 2000.
Well, let's finish up with the what law enforcement programs are doing right now. That surrounds that. Law enforcement programs are having these volunteering. Some gun manufacturers will fire a piece of an ammo through a gun, save a piece of brass and the projectile from that, and catalog it for each gun they sell. So that is evidence that could be brought forward later.
Interesting.
Local law enforcement has got these programs where they're called Save a Casing program. And what they'll do is, like, they participate with businesses like ours. We didn't do it for some civil liberties reasons. They have a police officer here. You come in and voluntarily shoot your gun. They save that piece of brass and catalog that, and then put it in. Either you save it for yourself, or they save it for you, which is the worst thing you could do. And then if your gun's stolen, used in a crime, or they can say, "Hey, do you have a piece of casing so we can match this gun up to a suspected crime that was committed?" And you can voluntarily hand it over. Those are some of the that's happening right now in the country.
Interesting.
I'm a little dual-sided on that. One, I can see the benefit of that. In case you had something taken from you, then you could prove that not it, right? Or
you could get
the civil liberties piece of it is like, maybe that piece of evidence gets in the wrong hands.
That's right. Yeah, I could see both sides of that as well. So it's 2006, you're out of the Army and you hit the civilian job market. So how did you end up at the as chief sales officer there at Rainier Arms?
So I had to do something when I got out of the Army, right? So I wanted to work fast. So I knew there was a company that I had done business with right before I went to combat. I bought a lot of equipment from this company, and they hired me. They hired me to be the responsible adult in the shipping and receiving department. because the guy was having a problem getting packages out the door into his customer. Well, he hired me, and I said, "Are you sure you want me?" You said responsible adult, so I sure I was the right guy for that. Well, I was able to take some organizational skills I learned while I was in uniform and apply it to this civilian order fulfillment structure. They were doing a lot of double work, and they weren't working as a team, and so I was able to straighten that out. And then I noticed that my general manager was listening to voicemail every morning and saving the voicemail, not ever calling the people back. And these people were wanting to buy hundreds of things because the war was on. It was hot, right? And we were making commodities for warfighters. And so me being me, I'm drinking my coffee in the morning before everything gets started. He's listening to his voicemail. I'm writing the phone numbers down. Right? And then he goes to lunch or whatever. I made 10 phone calls, booked 4 orders.
Wow.
And then the boss comes in, the owner of the company comes in and goes, "Jesus Christ, we're busy as shit. Who's booking these orders?" And I said, "Well, I booked some of those orders." He goes, "You're now the new director of sales for the company."
Wow.
So then I got booted into that. We sent that business from a $6 million business to a $12 million business in 18 months.
Wow.
And ultimately, we built that into during the surge, we built that into a $16 million business. So
that's impressive.
I was pretty proud of that.
Yeah.
And Rainier Arms was always my customer. They always bought things for me to put on their website and stuff. And I knew the owner, John Wong, and I knew he was a great human being. And we spent a lot of time together at trade shows and seeing each other in the local area. He lived in the local area there in Washington with me, and it just come to the part where I knew that my last name wasn't conducive to become the CEO of the company. So it was just like when I made the decision to leave the military, I had to make a decision to move on.
Right.
So I made that decision. I asked John if he would like to have a guy like me on his staff. To my surprise, he said yes immediately. He goes, "I don't really know what you'll do in our company, but I know I want you on the team." So
yeah.
that was good for me. So then, as time went on, they had a few things they needed opened up in the Midwest, and they had nobody there. So I said, "I'll go and do it. Why not? I'm used to moving."
Right.
Ready for a change. I wanted to get out of Washington State because it was becoming a little too liberal. And then, I got here to the Midwest, did what I did here, that made these places of success. And then he asked me to be the chief sales officer for the big company. So we're a $40 million firearms and accessory company now. And I feel like I still can't do enough to help this guy. And I'm very blessed to be in the industry that I am. Some of the greatest people ever. One thing about this industry that I love is that, man, assholes don't hang around long.
That's
right?
good.
If you're a bad person, you get called out of the herd in the damn like a sick wildebeest.
Wow.
And the damn jackals get you. It is really it's comforting to watch. It's not fun to watch, but it's comforting to say, "Oh, say that's a bad human being. He's not going to be in this industry long." And lo and behold, 18 months later, they're gone.
Wow.
Like a bad commander. Like remember in the Army, you have a commander.
Oh yeah.
And then what would I always tell you, Pete? I'm like, we just got to hang on for another 12 months, and then another jerk will be in this place.
That's true.
Hey, do you remember the guy that got in trouble for putting his pistol in the safe at work instead of the arms room? You remember that guy?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
He retired a full bird colonel in the Army.
Are you kidding me? Wow, that's hilarious.
I saw him. I was a civilian for about 10 years, and I'd seen him at I went to a cocktail party on Fort Knox, and he stood there, and he was damn lieutenant colonel. I was like, "You got to be shitting me." Should have been gone a long time ago, dog.
Exactly. So now you're remarried. You're father. You're a grandpa. So how is that part of your life been going? I know I'm a grandpa myself, and I really enjoy spending the time with the little ones.
So I never had any children myself, right? I've always helped other people raise their kids, and that's rewarding in and of itself. And then the grandchildren that came out of those relationships are as much mine as anyone else's.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you that I'm super proud of all my grandchildren and my sons, and the extended family I have with my new wife. We've become a family very fast. It's highly rewarding, and I'm going to spend, like, funny you should mention it. When I'm done here, I got a couple more hours worth of work, and then I'm going to spend the afternoon with my grandsons that are getting out of school a little early, and we're going to go and do some things together.
That sounds good.
Yeah, and they're little guys too. They're like 2 and 5, so it's going to be Nerf wars for.
Oh, that sounds awesome. That sounds awesome. Now I have to tell you, when I was researching this for getting ready for this interview, I was laughing my ass off because I'm reading your resume basically, and it's all this serious stuff, Cav Scout and Tactical Tailor, and then I see Sal's Pizza, and it just made me laugh just thinking about how you are and your personality. But how good was Sal's Pizza, GW?
Brother, I gotta tell you, it's the measuring stick for all pizza now.
Really?
It's never been enough.
And that was back home in Virginia?
It was. I went to work there when I was a high school student. A friend a sister of my best friend got me a job there, and I learned work ethic. I learned that I didn't want to be in the food service industry.
I was the same way, and I learned a lot of things that really carried with me. Old school, hard scrabble, boss, no BS. You worked or you were fired. And I learned a ton of stuff from him. So that's interesting that you say that.
Yeah, he was a immigrant from Napoli, and I always thought he was probably on the witness protection program while he was.
Hey, what are you saying about an Italian, huh?
And he would always say, "No, you're crazy." But his business is a staple in our community to this day. There in that little town in Virginia. And anybody that went to school in Virginia Tech or Radford University and of the same age or a little older than me, I delivered your pizza. So
that's cool. That's cool.
As a high school kid, delivering pizza to a dorm full of college-age females, I got some education.
I'm sure you did.
And then they figured out that they could make me blush really easily, and they would do it every time.
So anything else you wanted to mention while we're doing this? Anything at all you want to plug or anything at all?
Shamelessly, we want to talk about rainierarms.com. If you have a need for high-end equipment and firearms, come see us.
Yeah, I'll make sure I link to that down below in description, or anybody that's watching this that wants to get in touch with GW. I'll make sure I put your YouTube link there as well, because you guys have a YouTube channel with some videos.
And on your order, make sure you mention GW, and they won't give you any discounts. So
there you go. Very good.
The second thing is I'm involved in a veterans charity called Resilient Warrior. And it's resilient_warrior.org. And what we do is we have a facility in Harper, Kansas. It's kind of down in some cornfields and some wind farm area, and it's designed to take homeless veterans and give them a place to launch. Now, you can't, like, if you've got substance abuse issues that you haven't dealt with, or you're not being seen for your ailments at the VA, we can't bring you there. So if you're ready to launch and you got your stuff under control and you just need one less thing to worry about, which is a roof over your head, we're going to provide it.
That's awesome,
We're going to help you get into where you need to be. Now, we've helped, in the 24 months we've been open, we've helped 7 or 8 people get into the program and then launch into society to do their things. Now, we weren't always very successful because, some people relapsed or whatever it is, but
right.
And when it feels the worst for us as administrators of the charity, I just have to ask myself, is it worth it if we help that one person?
Right.
Damn right it was.
That's an outstanding cause. I'll definitely make sure I link to that so that people can donate, do what they can. I think that's a very worthy cause.
They can donate. We have raffles all the time for some spectacular items. So be sure to go to the website and then check it out.
That's awesome, man. Well, GW, it's been such a pleasure having spent this time with you today. You are such a great person, and the things that I learned from you still stick with me. I share stories of our times together when I meet people and the subject comes up about my time in the military. You're just a one-of-a-kind person, and I'm very glad I get to know you. And I just want to go on record as if the zombie apocalypse actually happens, I'm driving my ass to Kansas so you can keep me alive. So,
okay, don't tell them where.
I won't.
Because I don't want a non-zombie apocalypse to occur.
Right.
But you're more than welcome to come here. And I live about a mile and a half away from the facility we will survive in, and I'll be here and ready for you and your family when you get here.
Outstanding. Well, good to see you, GW.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, Pete. The time we spent together, I remember all the time. The times we spent together, huddled around a potbelly stove, trying to not freeze our tails off at the range, burning cedar that we probably shouldn't have cut down.
Right.
All those things that we did. I still remember you smashing your noggin on the bottom of the vehicle.
Oh, man, laced my head open. I remember you said, just rub some dirt on it. You'll be fine. So.
As I'm panicking inside because I think you might have a concussion.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. So,
yeah,
well, so
guy.
good to see you, man. And you be good to yourself.
I'll try.
All right. Take care, my friend. See ya.
Yeah, you, my brother.